Good?
Yep.
All right. You're good, Shane. Good evening. Welcome to the December 13, 2022 meeting of the Newtown Township Trails and Greenways Committee. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded. Secretary Cook, could you please call the roll?
Committee Chair Custer,
Here.
Committee Member Archer,
Here.
Committee Secretary Cook is present, Committee Member Dungisa is absent, Committee Member Falcon,
Present.
Committee Member McCarthy, absent, Committee Vice Chair DiVincenzo,
Present.
and Committee Member Carr.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also present is Township Manager Nice. May we have a moment of silence? Thank you. Please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
The next item we have on the agenda is public comment for agenda items only. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on. Next item is the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
Motion to approve.
Second? Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion from the committee? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Next up on the agenda is the minutes of the November 8th meeting, 2022. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion by the committee? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. We move to new business. Section 7.1. Discussion and possible recommendation regarding the Delaware County Christian School land development application. Mr. DiVincenzo.
So yes, I don't know who else has seen this yet. We just got this a couple days ago to Dalia and myself and John, and Amy was part of the subcommittee for the plan review, so she's obviously not involved anymore, but kind of looked through it. I mean, John and I reviewed it last night, and Dalia wanted to talk to you about it. Actually, I think she walked her computer, but basically it looks like there's nothing really from this committee to comment on this particular one. I mean, it looks like they're doing 3 additions to their existing structures and buildings, but they're kind of doing them within, it looks like, existing impervious spaces anyways. So they're not affecting green space, such as like when we were reviewing other ones where they were cutting into the woods or something like that. There's nothing along the perimeters. There's nothing really, in my opinion, and John and I kind of went over this preliminarily. It said that this committee would really say, if we have any objections to anything, we make any recommendations, it would be for the trails and greenways and our initiative, what we're doing. The only thing it kind of brought up was just a conversational pieces. And it was more, again, related to other things. It was just part of the context of our conversation was when you do have development of any of the land is the potential for, you know, us discussing internally in this group and eventually putting forward to the Board of Supervisors is looking at how other townships handle when you are increasing impervious space and doing additions and different stuff of specifically the green spaces is more towards like, do other townships do anything for like mitigation credits and stuff like that, such as state governments do and different environmental agencies and things like that. But again, not really pertaining to this particularly. So everything looked good. What I was curious about is this is the first time we come across one we really didn't have any specific comment. Should we put that on paper and still do the same letter write-up, Mr. Neese, that we've done before? And we say, hey, we reviewed it, we've looked at it. There's nothing really that we believe is adverse to the trails and greenways in our township, and we don't believe there's any recommendations going forward.
Yeah, I think that if you have no comment, that it's probably worth saying that, you know, Trails and Greenways has no objection to the plan. And
Just a
you know,
one pager, one liner, put it.
I would keep it simple.
Yep.
One of the things that I'm asking the codes department to work on is a standard form for you to use.
Yeah, I
So-
created that one.
Yeah, well, we have one that we're looking at that would just be standard for any committee to use.
Okay,
And so, but yeah, and it may be that we'll just use what you have and just do that, but just so that it's similar and, you know, just no conditions, no changes, and then just move on.
yeah, and then, I mean, we also just recently got the other one for the Claude Deepaton property. It's not on our agenda, but we just got that, so we're reviewing that as well. And Leah, I was wanting to see if you and John and I could get on a Zoom call. You know, maybe early next week or something, if possible, to review that one and go over it so I can make comment and put together a letter on that.
Okay,
But that's all I have, sir, on
Which is the other one that you just got,
the Claude Deepaton property, the Veterans Memorial
Margot.
Development.
I don't think I've even seen that one. Okay.
Ah,
Okay,
It,
I'm-
yeah, it just came in
Okay.
and I was in the middle and John and I were having conversations and I was
Okay.
trying to finalize some of the other stuff.
I haven't
I'm
even seen.
free Tuesday,
Okay.
Wednesday, or Thursday.
Wednesday or Thursday?
Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
Okay. Good. Before we move on, actually, I do want to make one sense that it did actually seem like they were doing the best job at the Delaware Christian School. It really seemed like their additions were very well planned to not expand their overall footprint. They were building those additions within kind of the architectural boundaries, like they were kind of closing off space because where they had little cut-ins in the building. So just, I think it's worth noting that as far as additions are concerned to large properties, it had no impact really to what was going on. And it's something that can be, you know, hopefully considered in the future of some of these other larger structures where they're adding on. It was just a nice example of
Yeah.
responsible development.
we did look at the perimeter, the streets which bordered, and even if we could ask for sidewalks, but probably unlikely given the scope of what they're doing, most of the area was steep slope, so it really did not lend itself to a sidewalk.
Yeah, anybody that's driven across that property on Goshen and Malin there, where that corners, it's all steep slope as it comes off, and there's no buffer, there's no bound. I mean, it's really not feasible or suitable anyways. So I concur with what John said.
Okay. All right, moving on, 7.3, discussion and potential action on future trail walks. Terry McCarthy is not here tonight. She did mention that at this point, she has no walk scheduled for 2023. But she did want to know if, well, we have a lot of the same walks repeating themselves. And the thought was maybe we could relocate some of those walks outside the borders of Newtown Township, like Don Guanella or Rose Tree or Ridley Creek State Park. And Mr. Neese, is that a problem from an insurance standpoint?
I'd have to look.
Okay,
Yeah, we asked this question a few
Yeah.
minutes ago. I know we talked about it briefly.
You
and
know,
it was unsure.
the one thing that I would say is think about what your mission is as an organization.
okay,
And your focus is Newtown Townships, trails and greenways. I mean, that's where your focus is.
Mhm.
So I'm not opposed to having groups do walks and all of those kind of things, but think about what your purpose is and what your focus should be. And how does, if going on a certain walk has a purpose to help enhance something within Newtown, that makes sense. But if the purpose is just to go have a walk, you may say that's not really what not everything that we do is necessarily within our mission. And so we should stay within our mission of what your responsibilities are. That's all.
The one thing I would say to that though is that the context of the previous meeting, which we asked the question was, we want to show some of our residents what has been achieved in our neighboring townships to give them a vision, because a lot of people can't envision it. A lot of people have a lot of problems against it. One of the things that I mentioned before was the Radnor Trail, and John, I know you mentioned it previously. That was a rail trail, again, a PICO thing that happened. And to kind of show them this is similar. So if you could actually bring some of the township residents, it would be the most effective, would be the most interested in it. It gives them that vision. Not everybody has that ability to kind of close their eyes or look at a space and understand that. And that was the context of why we wanted to do it specifically in our neighboring township.
If there is a specific trail that you're trying to mimic or do something that's similar, I think that makes sense. I think just to say we had to walk someplace else is probably outside the mission of this group. That's
Yeah.
my point.
So why don't we maybe just give Terry the suggestion that a couple of those maybe this year could be like vision
Yeah.
walks. And let's say, for example, we go and walk Skunk Hollow and Radnor. And then the next walk could be whatever trail we have a vision
It would connect
for.
into something.
And we can say on our walk in the township, this is what we're envisioning, similar to what they did
Mhm.
at Skunk Hollow. So why don't we tie it together with
Mhm.
like our vision? So if one of the themes is, one of the themes could be vision, another theme could be connectivity. And you could say, like, when we do the Goshen Trail Walk, our vision is to connect this trail with a trail that goes through SAP to Boot Road. And we can kind of, distinguish it that way so that it all ties together to Newtown Township.
yeah, that's a good point. Also, Skunk Hollow is something we want to connect with.
Right.
So we could see it from the other side and
Yep.
maybe give it a little impetus to getting that connected sooner.
Yep.
rather than later.
Yeah, I was hopeful that if we did do one of these other neighboring townships, we wouldn't just be doing the walk that's led in the typical way we've done them, but actually try to get somebody from that neighboring township who was involved in the development of the permitting or the action of it
Mhm.
from their group, so that they could actually talk about some of the specifics of how they executed, how they did this to the township residents that are interested.
Point. Okay, is there any other new business to come before the meeting? All right, moving on, old business, 8.1, update information on the trail hike at Drexel Lodge on November 19, 2022. Again, Terry McCarthy is not available tonight. Was anybody on that walk? I was in the hospital.
No.
Now,
Okay,
Christmas.
we'll have Terry talk about it next month. All right, 8.2, update information on wildflower plantings along Goshen Road Trail. Beth Dungisha is absent and I have no report. 8.3, update information on signage to Newtown Meadow Preserve. Again, Beth Dungisha is absent. She did mention that she has sent the text for the meadow signage to George Sharrett, so he has that. And she's still looking into some of the a pictorial part of the sign. Okay, 8.4, update information and potential action on extensions of the Newtown Meadow Preserve. Aaron Cook, Steve Neese.
You want to provide an update?
So I can't remember if we talked about the walk we did last time.
Our meeting last month was just before that walk. So
Okay,
this would be the update on that walk.
yeah, so do you want to do that? And then I'll
Sure.
talk whatever you,
Sure.
you know, and then I can fill in anything you missed. if
So
you
right
wish.
after our meeting last month, we went on a walk with the new HOA president at Lissitor and other members of the HOA there, as well as George Sheretz. And we walked the Meadow Preserve Trail. And we looked at the different property lines and the potential for creating extensions to the Meadow Preserve. So the first thing we discussed with them is the potential for doing a initial or temporary extension to the Meadow Preserve that would go through Echo Valley. And the second thing we discussed with them was an eventual more permanent, maybe longer term to be built trail that goes on the Lissitor property from the Meadow Preserve out to Goshen Road, where we would then have to work with PennDOT to do a crosswalk over the Goshen Trail. And as you know, part of the mission statement of this committee is to create connectivity between trails. Temporarily, we would create connectivity in a really nice complete loop there using Echo Valley Lane. And more permanently, we would like to have the trail on the Lissitor property that connects with the Goshen Trail. And the new head of the HOA at Lissitor was very open to everything that Steve and I shared with him. I forwarded to him the maps that we had done when we did our initial trail walk there. And I haven't gotten any feedback from him on the maps that we provided to him, but they seemed like they were very interested in looking into the trail extension initially, looking into a more permanent trail, and also further diving into the potential for parking there at the Meadow Preserve.
Yeah, I think it's a good summation. Just so you know, I kind of left it that our first step was going to go to provide parking. I think we need to do that for a variety of reasons. One, obviously, is to get people to be able to get access to the Meadow Preserve. The second piece, if we do a temporary trail that goes into Echo Valley, one of the things will be making sure that people aren't going to Echo Valley to park to enter the trail. And so that will be a piece that we have to work on. So we need to be able to say we have parking somewhere for people to go to. So what we're going to do, probably starting in January, George and I will start meeting with the HOA and discussing, you know, what the parking would look like, what the impact would be. They're concerned. Mostly, I don't think they're as concerned about where we have the non-ADA parking, but where we have ADA parking, it will be kind of close to where a couple of the houses are. And so the recommendation, you know, we'll probably come in with some screening of some sort, you know, plantings or whatever to kind of block those parking spots so that they're not seen as easily.
Is that going to be down near the sign
Yes,
showing the entrance of
Yes.
to the park? Okay.
yeah. And so.
You're talking about right off Goshen?
No, this is all the way down right at the Meadow Preserve
At the
itself.
end of the lane that goes between
where the sign
Episcopal
is.
and Lissitor.
Oh, okay.
So
Understood.
we're gonna do that. We're gonna have some open meetings. The idea that I expressed with them was if the community feels like we do that well, there's probably a good chance that we can look at doing the trail well. And so this is a way to do that, build the relationship between us and Lissitor HOA in such a way of working together, achieving a common goal and seeing what we can do.
And I think that that's a good point, Steve, that I didn't know before our discussion that day, is that some of the members of the Listener HOA said that in Listener's marketing material, they had said that there were 5 to 10 miles of walking trail initially when people were buying places in Listener, and they feel that there isn't connectivity among the trails, that they have the Listener Trail and then they have the Meadow Trail, but they
Yeah.
also have to cross Goshen, and it's a busy street and it's hard to cross when you're walking dogs or riding a bike or whatever it is. So I felt like we shared the same goal, this
Sure.
committee and the residents of Listener, which was a good support
Yeah.
for what we're trying to do, that they want a continuous loop on their side of Goshen Road. So I felt like the temporary trail to Echo Valley would be good for all of the Echo Valley residents on that side of Goshen. You can have this loop without having to cross the road, and the Listener residents felt the same way.
Have you had any more feedback from Echo Valley residents? Or is it
Here's,
just quiet?
here's my proposal. My proposal is that until we get Listener kind of in agreement to do that, I'd rather have Listener be in agreement and then we go back to Echo Valley with the idea that, I mean, we could go to Echo Valley residents and they all say yes. Let's assume that they're all happy, maybe except for the 2 that live right there on that piece that we would go in. But let's say everybody else is happy and we make a perfect arrangement. And if we never get Listener, then it just doesn't work. So
Yeah,
my
yeah.
thoughts are, let's get Listener to agree first. And then take those steps.
That makes sense.
And we agree on that strategy. I stated the same thing in our meeting when I updated everyone last month, that the township and this committee want to make sure that residents are involved in this conversation from the very beginning. But it doesn't really make sense to go out and spend a lot of hours talking to residents if Listener isn't going to allow us to use their property. Because as you know, that little bit of property, it belongs to Listener, and we have to have their permission. So once we get their permission, then we want to make sure that all of the township residents, and especially the residents there and neighbors in Echo Valley, are involved in these conversations, and that we're working with them from the very beginning, as soon as Listener's on board.
And I think that one of the things that is a legitimate concern of the Listener HOA is liability. And so we're having conversation with them about ways to reduce liability for them.
Okay.
But to answer your question too, John, there have been several Echo Valley neighbors who have approached me, so they must be either tuning into our meetings or have heard through the grapevine that there is a possibility for a connection to the Meadow Preserve. And we, as you know, have so many people who walk their dogs every day.
Yeah.
Lots of people have been coming up to me recently saying they really want it, which I hadn't heard
That's good
before.
news.
So the residents really would like
You
that.
hear the objections first,
Exactly.
but you have to wait around a little bit to get the positive.
Well, I think,
Exactly.
I mean, Chris was the one, obviously, I forget his last name, that was here at the meetings and was one of the
McConaughey.
objectors. Thank you, sir. Yes, Chris McConaughey. But he had said that he had been speaking with all of his neighbors. So as he's done that, he's almost gotten the word out to the rest of his neighbors. And inevitably, some of them are definitely coming forward. So that's good. But to your point, Mr. Neese, is that with the parking and everything, if that's their biggest concern, then when this does eventually get rolled out, the main thing we have to do is somehow make it obvious and educate the public. Hey, listen, we're opening this. This is going to be great. However, you cannot park here. Here's where you are parking. And that goes back to one of our earliest conversations in these meetings that we've had, is a map accessible on the website for Newtown Township and other places where it clearly defines trailheads and parking areas and no parking and stuff like that. Because like you said, it's a good idea. It's basically an audition to get more in the future, which means we can't mess it up. And we got to make sure that the biggest concern they have is not, right away, people start parking tons of cars in there because they don't know where to go.
So before we put the cart before the horse, one of the first questions I have is, if we're talking about an extension of an existing Newtown Square trail, piece of property, an extension I would assume would be coming out of Newtown Township piece, right?
Yes.
So then we sort of interlaced this conversation of the HOA from Listener identifying that they want to do further extensions of their own trails. Okay. The question then is the accessibility of public trailways through private trailways. Would that be an easement? Would they be dedicating those trails for maintenance through the
Yeah,
township?
and that's the piece that we have to work through.
Okay, so
That's
it's
the piece.
premature at this point.
Yeah, I think I think we need to understand what their concerns are, as an HOA. Once we understand what their concerns are, then I'll sit down with our team and talk about how do we address these concerns. Some of that'll be with you, some of that'll be with our solicitor, and we'll sit down and we'll go through and say, here are their concerns. What can we eliminate by doing, if we make it just an easement, do we eliminate it? Do we need to take it as a dedicated trail to the township? What makes the most sense to put the most risk back on us versus on them? Because that's their concern. And I get it, if you're looking at it, we have the most protection as the township because state law gives us the most protection. More protection than they get as an HOA. So, what are the ways that we can do that without it coming across that they're giving away something? And so but that they're also getting something. And so it's working together.
As I understand it, if we have an easement, then we can extend the township protection.
That is my understanding too. The question becomes this, and it's always the case, right? It's not now that's what is the way that reduces the chances of them being sued, not just what reduces the risk. So what I'm saying in that is the township has been sued multiple times since I've been here. Almost every suit we've worked out so that we've walked away from the suit because people name us just because we happen to be around. We did something, right? Township was the people that inspected the building that we have a problem with. Well, the township's not responsible for that level, right? And so, but that doesn't keep us from being named. So the best way to do it, to keep them from being named, so they're not having to pay out to, the control. And that's the kind of thing that we have to watch. That's what's the best way to protect somebody if that's what we're doing, if the purpose is a public use trail. Now, if they're going to have a private trail, that's their trail that connects to our trail, that's a whole different story.
It still doesn't protect people from getting sued.
No, but there's ways to bring it.
It could reduce it.
It could reduce it and
Yeah.
at least reduce.
I'm learning that, Joe, with it.
At least get to the point that a judge would make a quick decision that this party shouldn't be involved in the process. Yeah.
On the parking, what do you envision this committee's role to be? Is that going to be exclusively at the township level?
I'm not saying exclusively, but I think that we're going to come up with a plan. We'll come back to you, say, here's our plan between you and Parks and Rec. Here's what we're wanting to do. And this is the direction we're headed. Because to be honest with you, the parking's really not making a really big impact on the trail itself, but it is making a trail on the Greenway space. That's where I see you guys weighing in on.
Okay. Is the anticipation still to have parking spaces along the access road?
No.
It's going to be where I had
Yes.
initially come up with a map.
But not probably the number that you originally came up with.
Yeah, you'd have to lower the level quite a bit to get to
Yeah.
that level.
Well, or raise it. So
Okay,
whichever way you look at it.
yeah,
So
yeah, okay.
I think we can get 10 spaces down there without doing much excavation. And that's the goal.
10 spaces. Okay. That's
Well,
all.
the goal is to do it right. My goal for next year with getting the parking in is to get the maximum number of spaces that we can do without having to build a retaining wall and all of those kind of steps. Is
Gotcha.
to go in. Someday when we do the full build out of the Meadow Preserve and we put in the full 88, walkway and all of those kind of things, it's going to require some retaining walls. It's going to require some regrading. And at that time, we can probably do the grading for additional parking. But right today, what if we can go in and get 10 spaces that allow people to go start using that space and enjoying that space, safely parking, addressing that, then we should do that. What may require, going back where you said along the roadway, do we need one or two pull-offs that allow people to pass coming in and out, because it's basically a one-lane road.
Yep.
And we think that one or two pull-offs along the one side can help create a safe way to do that.
I mean, a number of years, excuse me, a number of years back, there was the thought of putting parking along the access road.
Yes.
But I guess that's not in consideration.
Currently, that's not in consideration for a variety of reasons.
Usually the issue when you put parking along the side of the road and it gets filled up, people just continue and then start pulling up on areas they're not supposed to and start, crowding the road, and seeing that at a lot of the state parks. And, they started banning that up in the Delaware Water Gap during COVID because parking lots were getting filled, but there were certain spots where you were legally allowed to go alongside the road. And then they just got rid of that and started ticketing people. It started getting so bad, people were just pulling off everywhere. They had a car go down a ditch because they parked on a precarious spot that they couldn't really tell, and the soil went out from under them. So.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to say on that we should remember too, as a committee, that the reason we started talking about this from the beginning was we were trying to identify quick hits. And I do think the strategy that we're approaching this is so solid, because we need the parking first by the Meadow Preserve, not only so you can have somewhere else to park if you were to access it from Echo Valley, but for everyone who wants to use the Meadow Preserve, because currently there's no signage, there's no parking. But I think we're ready and in agreement with Steve to move at whatever pace the HOA at Lister is willing to move for the initial extension trail, but the parking first, because we were trying to identify some quick hits where we could get some stuff done, as opposed to the full loop, the longer, bigger Lister trail, which is obviously going to be a lot longer term.
Agreed.
Okay, good discussion. Next, 8.5, update information on the rail trail feasibility study. Joe Falcon, Steve Neese.
I have no update.
Yeah, the only update I can give you at this point is that it looks like that's going to be tabled for an indefinite period of time while we look at some other options there.
Okay.
Provide more context, specifically because of the crossing of that private drive area.
Well, I think
The main contributor.
that's the main issue. There's some legal context to that is not easily overcome. And so, the question now is there another way that makes sense? And to be honest with you, there may be.
Legally or logistically?
Logistically.
Okay.
And that would also be legal. But the question really becomes, how much energy do we place on that in light of there may be some other places that we can get some things done. And right now, to be honest with you, staff energy to put into something that we probably are not going to be able to do anything very quickly, it would be better to work with you to look at other places where we could get some hits that are wins for you now, and then go back to that at some point.
And this was as a result of meeting with the township residents.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Neese, is there any further information on meeting times?
So,
2023.
yeah, so I'm still working on one thing. I apologize. We had a conversation with Parks and Rec. But part of the Parks and Rec team was not there, so there was not a definitive answer back. I'm going to be reaching out, having a few conversations. But you will be on that night. The question will be whether we're doing 5:30 or whether we're doing 7. And I just don't know that answer yet. There was not an objection from the few members that were there that night to doing 5 or 5:30 on their side. What I just need to know is there's a couple key members that weren't there that night. I need to make sure that they're okay with that. And if they're okay, then we would move you to the 7 o'clock hour and we would keep them at the 5, we would move them at the 5 o'clock hour. If that's what makes sense for you all.
No, that,
I
Was
would
that what
prefer
we-
7, but other people might
I thought-
disagree.
you want it later? I thought you wanted it earlier, sir.
I thought there were some of you that couldn't get here by 5 or 5:30, and that's what I was looking for.
Oh, okay.
So the discussion last,
I'm okay.
last month was 5 o'clock. And then we had a discussion about how 5:30 would be better for us.
If
on this
5:30
day.
is, if you want to do 5:30, that's a
We would
done
prefer
deal.
to do
I
5:30
thought,
as
I
opposed to
thought
7.
Beth couldn't be here at that time, and that's why we were looking at a different time.
Yeah, I think there was something, and Anthony, you.
I mean, I'm coming from Jersey Tuesday through Thursday, so I would have to cut out of work early that once a month when we did it, and sometimes I can, sometimes I can't, just because it's such a long haul, but
Yep.
I mean, I'm okay with sacrificing it the rest of the committee, but it doesn't sound like everybody's on the same page, because you're
Yeah.
saying you'd prefer it to be later.
Well, I mean, normal, a lot of times I'm working at the office. It's so close to 7. So 5:30 would be a little bit of a cut into business, but I would go along with what the majority wants.
Yeah, my preference would be 5:30 if it works for everyone. If not, I would have to look at whether I could do 7. And I know Delia and I voiced that last month.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is if we continue to be better and more efficient with these meetings, so
Right.
it's not as big of a problem. If we can continue to keep them within an hour like we've done more recently, that's great. And that's easy for me to get here at that point. 5:30, I can make it work if that's what everybody would prefer. So you just let me know.
If 5:30 works, I'm happy to use that. I was under the impression that was a problem for a couple people, and that's why I was looking at another solution.
Yeah,
Well, can we for the next meeting, I mean, I know it's gonna be hard, but do everything we can to at least get everybody either online or on here so that we can have every single member vote on this in our.
Well,
next-
here's what I got to tell you. January is right around the corner.
Yeah,
Right.
And it will
Yeah.
be out if it's either going to be 5:30 or it's going to be 7.
all right.
So you just let me know which one you want and I will do it.
Why
The
don't I
problem-
do a doodle poll and send it out to everybody? And you can vote on whether you want 5:30 or 7 PM on Thursdays, and then I can forward that vote to Mr. Neese.
And the majority.
I agree with that. I like that. I was
And
just
then
about.
he'll know what to recommend with Parks and Rec.
There we go.
Okay.
good.
I'll send it tomorrow.
I don't know if this matters as much, but I wonder if one time or another makes a difference to get more township residents to join the meetings.
I can tell you, I sat in a meeting last night that this whole building should have been packed. And not one person was here.
Well, December.
It was 7 o'clock.
No, I'm saying December, I'm saying.
People won't.
No, but
at 7 o'clock.
Oh,
last
oh,
night,
I see what you mean.
last night,
Too
the
late.
board voted on the budget. And was voting on whether or not there was going to be a tax increase.
Mhm.
And there was not one person sitting out here.
That's incredible.
And so, I mean, I could take that nobody cared, go ahead and do the tax increase. Or I could say that, whatever the thing was. So, the board did make a decision, but it was interesting to me that one of the most important things that people tend to want to have a say over and not one person was here. So I don't know that it matters whether it's 7 o'clock or 5:30 is my point.
Gotcha.
I do think 7 o'clock's late. We would probably get more people at 5:30, so would Parks and Rec.
I mean, I'm aware that for those of you that have kids, that you're trying to get in bed by 8 o'clock, if you are here at here at 7,
Yeah.
makes it hard to have kids in bed by 8 o'clock, right? I get the other point on the other side, that there's those who are here who say, my workday doesn't really end until 5:30. To get here, I can't get here till 7. So,
Or I want to have dinner and then come.
yeah, I get it. So, but the idea is to try to come up with something that works, and
All right, well, send the
Okay.
doodle out.
I will.
Thank you.
All right, any other board comment about anything? Is there any public comment?
none.
Any items for the next agenda?
I just wanted to add that I am gonna update my original draft that I shared with the committee about the proposal for the Meadow Preserve Extension Trail. I'm gonna update it with what we discussed with the Listener HOA on our walk.
Mhm.
And I will present that not present it, but I'll share it with you guys at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, I've heard no public comment or no items for the next agenda other than this. Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
Motion.
To adjourn.
Second,
Second.
any committee comment? Hearing none, all signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? You guys have it, meeting adjourned.